Alright my friends, you have played it, I have played it, what's the deal now? My personal opinion right now, on a scale from 1 to 10, it is a strong 6.5, but with just a few fixes, I can see this game becoming an 8 easily. I mean, I hope for more, but I also want to be realistic, and since a game that is straight up 10 doesn't exist for me, it is already pretty good. Alchemia is a brand new studio. This is going to be their debut, but even all those things considered, I gotta say, things are already feeling right, and I love how devoted they are. If the demo showed us one thing that most of us can agree on, it is that a whole lot of people are very passionate about the franchise, and that is a good thing. You see, even when some people have harsh criticism, don't forget, it comes from a place of genuine love. These are quite some big shoes to fill, but I think that the developers know that, and their efforts to absorb the opinions of thousands of fans is something that is rarely done by studios these days. Being so in touch with a fanbase deserves way more recognition, but this is not the time to discuss this. So let me finally get to the point where I ask myself, what is the final verdict? Even though there are some more minor things that I would criticize, we have to focus on the core aspects that need some adjusting. Combat, movement, animations, AI, lighting, and optimization. As I said many times before, I am very happy that they took inspiration from the original games. The directional combat was an important part of the action-packed encounters we had in the colony, and I simply love that it found its way back into the remake. I pretty much enjoy that we need to fight both with mouse and keyboard. Down with the left-click fest a la Witcher 3, Gothic 3, Skyrim, and so many other games. They also gave us a small addition, a heavy swing that deals more damage but leaves you defenseless for a brief moment. Another great addition, one that I actually proposed in one of my first videos, are the cleave mechanics. When facing multiple enemies, a weapon swing will damage everyone in front of you. Dodging, parrying, forward and sideward swings and combos are obviously taken from the original, but are they in the right spot? So, one of the things Alchemia mentioned over and over again is that they want the spirit of the original to carry over to the remake, and they did quite a good job in the general idea of how combat should work, but there is a problem with its responsiveness. The response to the input commands is too slow. Here is a little comparison between the original and the demo. Both conditions are the same weapon, same fighting skill. In the original, once the attack input is given, the hero immediately strikes and hits the target. In the demo, however, we see a comparably long-winded animation and a delayed impact of the weapon. It seems like a nitpicky thing to say, but it greatly takes away from the action-packed combat that we all know and love. The combat was fast and visceral. Being an untrained fighter didn't make your swings significantly slower, it simply made chaining attacks more difficult and limited the amount of attacks one could chain together. Another aspect that I didn't really feel in the demo was the rhythm-based combat. As a trained swordsman, you can just click whenever and your attacks will chain. This takes away from the player's skill and is way more forgiving, something that I don't enjoy too much. Mastering the rhythm in the original felt rewarding when you could work just another weapon swing into your rotation before you had to dodge or parry. The combat of Gothic always felt like you had a real chance to beat your opponent, even if you were under-leveled. Through precise and fast swings you were in total control, and your mechanical skill on the keyboard was all that matters. In the demo, however, it felt like you are at the mercy of those slow attacks and your skill doesn't matter that much anymore. Targeting was also an issue that I faced a few times, and I wished that an enemy would be put into somewhat of a soft focus, just like in the original. This made strafing around the target and repositioning intuitive, giving the player more control over the situation. Sadly, strafing around an enemy and soft-locking it into focus is not possible in the demo. One thing that really irritates me is the lack of forward combos. As a trained fighter, there are exactly 2 attacks that can be stringed together, then the combo resets. The original allows you to chain up 4 attacks. These combos give you the opportunity to deal more damage in a short time window and are meant to close the gap between the player and the enemy. Gaining ground with the combos in the demo becomes a real issue and the damage output is diminished. So, to recap, attacks need to happen faster, the iconic combinations of forward strikes must return, and the rhythm-based combat should be more pronounced. The movement feels too sluggish. The inertia when running, for example, seems too strong, which is kind of expected when you're opting for a more realistic approach, but just as the master himself, Gabe Newell, once said,
"And I've never thought to myself that realism is fun. I go play games to have fun."
While Gothic lives off of its realistic approach to societies in a certain environment, NPCs reacting to things that happen around them, not every single aspect needs to be dead-on realistic. Sure, the movement in the first 2 games was far from being called smooth, but I do think that there is a sweet spot between a certain realism and fun. The inertia becomes very obvious when trying to run in a circle, and then you quickly realize how realism skips the uncanny valley and becomes almost comical. The inertia can also have negative impacts on fights when trying to reposition or retreating. With that said, I don't know anything about developing games, but maybe it would be already enough to tune down some of the parameters which adjust the inertia factor. First and foremost, I do like most of the animations, but there is one problem. They feel a bit too slow as well. It doesn't matter if it's picking up items, opening a treasure chest, or interacting with chairs or benches. Make them just a little bit quicker, and I think they are just fine. The AI shouldn't be a carbon copy of the old version, but there are some enemy behaviors in the original that made the fights a little unpredictable, and that was a good thing. Let's take mole rats for example. Sometimes when fighting these languid creatures, they will stop attacking and just stare at you. Usually what you aim for is an attack so you can dodge it and counterattack, but if there is no incoming action, the fight becomes a real gamble, especially in the early game. This little gap in the mole rat AI oftentimes made the fight really challenging, and that is something that I actually enjoyed. It creates the illusion that the animal is sentient, forcing you to let your guard down only to viciously maul you. What I'm trying to say, some of the AI felt too similar and too predictable. The original had some pretty awesome enemy AI if you think about it. Mole rats would bait your attack. Wolves are aggressive and would sometimes dodge. Goblins would swarm around the player in a circle. Razors would go all in, and the humanoid NPCs have complex attack patterns on their own. There are 2 factors determining a humanoid NPC's fighting style. First, their weapon skill, and second, a more defensive or offensive AI. Let's take some NPCs from Gothic 2 for example. Some are trained fighters with an offensive fighting style, which makes it relatively easy to punish them because once they charge, you can easily step to the side and beat them to a pulp. Orcs behave like that too, but make up for it with more damage in general and way more health. Now let's take a look at Sentenza from Ona's farm in Gothic 2. He is a trained fighter, but also very defensive. It becomes very hard to counterattack and to defeat him, but a skilled player with good reactions has a real chance, and that is the beauty of Gothic's combat system. And this would work in the remake as well, as long as the combat becomes more responsive and the animations faster. There is a third combination that some bandits have, for example. They are master swordsmen, but have an offensive AI. They will kill you on the spot, but are usually easy to punish. You see, there are quite some variations that differ greatly from each other, and I simply couldn't see too much difference in the fights I had in the demo. The difficulty might have been tuned down for the demo for accessibility's sake, but the remake should definitely make you sweat during the fights, especially in the early game. Some fans have stated that the lighting and the color palette being used doesn't really look like Gothic. While some adjusted the saturation and brightness to get a more nostalgic approach, one thing is barely mentioned: the skybox and the resulting lighting. First, I have to say that I really love the bleak tone that they are going for, the dusty and bland colors that we saw in the Orc territory, the verdant mixed woodlands, and the stark contrast between light and shadows. But I think there is something about the criticism that is very valid. What it really comes down to, in my opinion, is the skybox and the warm light of the original. In Gothic, there are basically two types of weather in skyboxes. One is grey, overcast with optional rain, and the main one being less overcast, but a sky that seems to transform the whole valley into an eternal golden hour. Even when it's morning or midday, the sky looks like the sun is setting already, and this greatly affected the general atmosphere of the overworld. It had an effect on the textures, the feeling, and how we perceive the colony. Another thing that contributed greatly is the fog that soaked up the light and helped greatly bathing everything in these colors that we love so dearly. Yes, I know that the weather in the skybox and the demo are static, and we already saw heavy thunderstorms with dark clouds in some released footage, and we can be sure that the weather will have more variety, and that is absolutely an improvement, but I think that the general feeling, the default one, should be inspired by the original. A distant sun, warm but also bleak colors, and a skybox that seems to capture the feeling of one of these late summer days when the light slightly begins to fade, and a mixture of the pale blue sky and these warm, almost golden clouds beneath, illuminated by the last rays of the sun. Everything becomes engulfed by this mild orange and golden glow, emphasizing the earthen colors of the Valley of Mines. The last thing that I want to mention is the optimization. Some people have reported that playing on higher resolutions with graphics set high, the FPS would drop a good amount. Since not everyone has a high-end computer and some folks will be playing on consoles, this aspect should be refined as well. One good example is when you start talking to an NPC. Most of the times I got a low-resolution model at the start of the dialogue. Sometime after that the HD textures are loaded, but this happens with a significant delay and is kind of irritating. I have no idea how that could be achieved, but some people in the know might give us some feedback in the comments below. Now let's talk briefly about lesser points of criticism. There is currently no way to zoom out of your character, which makes it feel a bit claustrophobic at times and could be an issue when fighting multiple enemies. Then the original had a first-person view to look around. You were unable to fight, but it was a nice option to soak in the atmosphere and observe your surroundings. And then, well, diving and water. I wish the hero could take a header when standing close to the water, which gives you a little boost when trying to dive. Currently, there's also no way to kick your opponent when no weapon is equipped. And I do really love the Bruce Lee cross kick from the original. Please bring that back. Some of the fluff items should be usable. Smoking pipes, for example. Cleaning the ground with a brush. Playing the lute, etc. I was really disappointed when I couldn't look at the note that I found on Jorik's corpse. I was really curious. Torches, next. They extinguish after a while and can be picked up, again for later use, but I wish there was an option to extinguish it yourself. And lastly, the barrier should make a thundering and rumbling sound once in a while to remind you that you are still in the colony. And that is basically it. If you have any other pieces of criticism and feedback, please let us have a discussion in the comments and keep it constructive so the devs know what to work on exactly. I thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Awaken.